Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, where we throw out the old blueprint so you can become who you were always meant to be. I'm your host, Jason Smith, and if you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends on social media and tag me in it at JBirdFit. Today, I have a very special guest for you, Julie Menanno. Julie is a licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed clinical professional counselor, and relationship coach. She earned her master's degree in psychology from Phillips Graduate Institute in Los Angeles, California. She currently has a clinical therapy practice treating couples in Bozeman, Montana, as well as a relationship coaching practice with a staff of coaches who serve clients all over the globe. Julie is trained in emotionally focused therapy for couples and specializes in working with attachment issues within relationships. Julie also provides insight for couples at The Secure Relationship on Instagram, where she's garnered over 1 million followers. Julie is also the author of Secure Love, out now wherever books are sold. Julie, welcome to the Blueprint Podcast. So you're in Bozeman, Montana.
Yes.
How nice is that?
I love it. I don't love it when last week it was just a complete
Snowing.
snowstorm. Yeah. And ski season, it's fine if ski season's open, but when ski season's down, there's no real benefit to snow in my mind,
Right.
unless it's either ski season or building towards that. But
Right.
yeah, no, we absolutely love it. We moved here from Los Angeles six or 7 years ago. I always forget.
That's a big
I cannot
change.
remember. Huge. We're very happy.
It's one of those places I've always wanted to go to and visit.
Yeah, you should
It's
come
on
out.
it's on the list.
If you're interested at all in Yellowstone National
Yes.
Park, this is the place to be in the summer. It's just gorgeous, and Bozeman has a lot to offer as far as like recreational stuff, whitewater rafting, stuff like that. And then taking a day or two in Yellowstone, it's just magical.
Oh, I can only imagine. I was actually last
Yeah.
year looking to rent a house out there for a little bit to see, and I was just looking. So you hop online and you
Mhm.
start looking, you're like, "Oh no, I guess maybe I can't rent a house
Yeah.
out there."
It's
It's
pretty
like
expensive.
it's so
Yeah,
expensive, but
it really
but the
is. Yeah,
experience is just the
yeah.
vastness of it and how beautiful it is, and those sunsets are just
No,
magical.
it really is. It really
Yeah.
is. We feel very fortunate. You're in Chicago?
Central to South Illinois is where I'm at
Okay.
now. So not a lot going on here. I live near a golf
Mhm.
course, and one
Nice.
of my biggest shtick online is take a walk with me, right? If you have an anxious attachment, take a walk with me. And,
I love it.
and of course the anxious
I love
attachers,
it.
they love that. They're
Yeah.
like, I want to take a walk with you. I'd love to do that. And so then we have a little conversation about just different
Oh,
circumstances
that's
and problems and
beautiful.
issues. And
Okay.
the tagline for all the stuff I do is helping you heal the relationship you have with yourself.
I love it.
Um,
Yeah, and it's so important.
it is, and I think for so many of us, we struggle with that so deeply, that relationship we have with ourselves that,
Mhm.
being a Gen Xer, I feel like
Oh, me
technology.
too.
Yeah, it's
We're
like
the best. We're the
I know
best.
we are though, like,
Yeah.
we're the last to know what it's like to never have to touch technology. It's like,
Yes,
we're
absolutely.
kids and we had Atari, which was like
Yeah,
blips on a screen, and then you
yeah.
evolve through that. Our first computer was a Commodore 64 with a
Oh
cartridge
my
in it and
god.
a tube TV.
Or the Apple IIc.
Yes.
Or the Apple IIc.
Yes, all of
Oh
that,
my
and so
god.
we've had that opportunity to evolve with all this stuff, but at the same time, we also had to sit with ourselves a lot of the time,
Mhm. Right.
and we were fortunate to have the opportunity to miss people and
Mhm.
to some degree learn to regulate ourselves,
Mhm.
a little bit, and now it's just technology is such a huge part of our lives that we can't seem to get away with it. And that's always, and I know people think I always pick on the anxious attacher, but it's just because your attachment style is truly a superpower if you learn how to embrace it
Mhm.
and to utilize that and to regulate your nervous system. You actually end up becoming regulating for others when you do that. So
Yeah, totally.
it's so important, but that technology will get you every time. I need that text message, I need the communication, you
It
need to
really
talk to
will.
me.
Yeah, it really
So
will, and
so
it's
what are your
so
thoughts on
easy.
that?
On technology and
Mhm.
attachment?
Oh, yeah.
Mm, yeah, I think that anything that, can let me think of how to word this. Anything that we have access to that can enable anxiety is gonna make it harder to heal. And if you have an anxious attachment and you're constantly in this kind of like chronic seek connection, it makes it, first of all, extremely easy just to text all your thoughts and feelings right then and there. without the measurement that comes from the personal interaction or someone kind of pushing back on what you're saying or pausing you or whatever. So there's one reason why it's enabling to that. I guess what I'm saying is it can be enabling of our most unhealthy parts, right?
Right.
If you're feeling anxious and you don't know how to sit with your feelings and regulate those, it is a very easy thing to do to just reach out to social media and get some kind of like dopamine hits of feeling accepted or lovable, or just distract yourself. Or I'm sure you're familiar with people who are obsessively self working and instead of feeling, which is the real self work. And so then they're going in and trying to absorb all this information in kind of an anxious, frantic way. And then if you're an avoidant, same thing, different side of the coin, which is social media helps you distract. It helps you not have to engage fully and authentically with text by texting information instead of just phone calls or one-on-one communication. So I think I could probably keep going, but I think that technology is just easily accessible, that we've never had more opportunity to enable our most unhealthy parts than we do now with social media. It's like anything you want, you can do to go defend against your feelings.
I think another part of this is when I tell people to look at the relationship with technology and how it impacts not only the relationship with themselves but with other people, there's this big wall of resistance that gets put up. I'm not going to get rid of social media or my phone for an extended
Mhm.
period of time. I'm not going to take those breaks because that's how I connect with people. What they're not
Mhm.
realizing a lot of the times is when we're texting somebody, we don't know how they're receiving that. We also,
Mhm.
when they send it back to us, they're volleying that ball back over to us. We don't know what their state of mind is in that moment and what they're experiencing and what
Sure.
they're going through and what those feelings actually are. So, what you end up doing is you draw from this past experience and you lay it on top of these words that have been given to you by this
Mhm.
person. And it's this person that I cared for before this person. When they said these words, this is what they meant by that. And so now you're
Mhm.
overlaying your own feelings on top of what's being said, and that
Mhm.
can lead to a lot of confusion and misinterpretation of just the
Totally.
text message as a
Yeah.
whole and ultimately argument. So that's why I encourage people, like, just pull back a little bit. You don't have to be so
Mhm.
tied to technology in that way.
Agreed. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's easy for that to happen even in a personal one-on-one in-person conversation. So it's only exponentially easier during text. And we've all seen how quickly things can spiral in a text.
Yes.
Both, really, but
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. In the opening cover of your book, Secure Love, you pose a question that everyone with an insecure attachment style asks themselves at some point in their lifetime, some later than others, and it's never too late, by the way. But what does a healthy relationship actually look like?
Mhm. And a healthy relationship, I think I'm going to start with it's a felt sense of ease most of the time. And the easiest way to answer that question is what's going on in your body most of the time when you're either with this person physically or with them mentally thinking about them. What happens? Are you on edge? Are you wondering what if you say the wrong thing? Are you going to push them away? Are you feeling neglected but don't know if you should speak up or let it go? And are you just always walking around with the sense of like dis-ease or angst? And when I say always, I'm talking like overall climate. Everybody feels these things at some times in any relationship. Discomfort is inherent in all relationships to some degree, but when discomfort starts to define the relationship, that's a problem. That means something needs to be addressed. It could be the opposite of that, which is just a chronic feeling of disconnect or emptiness. And that's the starting point, is how do I feel most of the time? And that's the question that most people aren't being taught to ask themselves. They're given information about what a really healthy relationship is supposed to look like. This is people how people speak to each other. This is how much time they spend together. Do they have date night? But really those things only matter as far as the impact those things have on the each partner's felt sense of safety, connection, being able to, if I reach to you, I'm going to be responded to in some way. Are you going to be there for me when I need you? Do I have a felt sense of being loved, or do I always have to work hard to get it, or battling these feelings of insecurity? So that's what I teach my kids is I'm like, look, however you feel in this relationship with this person, most of the time, that's how your life is going to be. How do you want to feel? If you go forward with this person, how do you want to feel most of the time? I would like to feel at ease and connected.
That would be
Mhm.
wonderful. No, I love that. How does it feel, but also what does it look like? I think for so
Yeah.
many of us, we miss out on some of these opportunities when we're younger to see what
Mhm.
certain things look like. What does secure love look like? What does joy actually
Mhm.
look like in the context of a relationship, but also out in the world? Am I able to see it and receive it? What is it going to take for me to get to that place of actually understanding what joy actually is? And that was
Yeah.
my own personal relationship that I had to really improve upon is that
Mhm.
relationship with joy and how to see it and how to receive it. What role does our childhood attachment play in adult attachment?
It plays a huge role because the childhood period is the period of time when our brains are growing the most rapidly. We're developing templates around how relationships work, what happens when I try to communicate my feelings or don't try to communicate my feelings. How am I responded to when I'm in distress or when I'm happy or when upset or angry or when I need comfort and connection? And so our brains are just throughout childhood developing this idea of who we are as emotional beings, as well as how people view us and how other people are going to show up for us. And so if you grow up in an environment where you have to learn to do other things with your emotions besides reaching for comfort and support, you will take those patterns into your adult relationship. So, for example, if you grow up learning, hey, if I show sadness, if I show any kind of fear or if I show any kind of insecurity, my mom or dad is going to get super overwhelmed and they're going to go into this fix it mode and they're going to say, what are you doing wrong to create this? Or they're going to call the school and make a big scene, or they're going to any number of things that they have this kind of emotional overreaction. So now you get the message, hey, not safe to show sadness, not safe to show distress. That's going to cause this really big kind of overreaction. That is just one example of a negative response. Other negative responses could be you need to suck it up, you need to not be sad. Or what did you do to contribute to the fact that you're feeling sad? That's on you. You're responsible for learning to self regulate. Or, you know what, if you're going to be angry, you need to go to your room to be angry. So, all of these experiences give a person a message about their emotional self. And what happens is if you're not getting comfort and support with your emotions, you will have to learn other ways to deal with them. And those other ways aren't going to be healthy because there's only one healthy way to deal with emotions. And that is either learning to self regulate when we don't have support or reaching for support and comfort when we do. So if you don't have that ability, which many people do not get that during childhood, what is going to become intuitive is protecting yourself from pain. If I don't have a healthy outlet, I'm going to have to protect myself from feeling it. You and I both know how many, that is a very long list of protective strategies, anything from addictions to just shoving your feelings away to being a relationship junkie to a shopping addiction to overworking, overachieving, workaholism. The list is just can
It's
go
endless.
on,
Yeah,
endless coping. And all of these things can be very good things. It's just when we start using them as coping strategies, they're not so helpful anymore. So, what happens now? You go into a relationship, you don't know how to deal with your own emotions. Relationships are emotional by nature. That's why we're in them. And if you don't know how to deal with yourself, you're certainly not going to know how to help your partner with their emotions. And you're going to probably have chosen someone who also doesn't know how to help themselves or you with their emotions. And so now you have two people that just are constantly acting out on their emotions that they never learned in childhood how to handle or communicate or get comfort for in a healthy way. And until that stuff gets healed and partners are really able to learn to start helping each other out, including self regulating. I'm a relationship therapist, so I'm really always pushing for co regulation between partners. But self regulation is just as important a piece to co regulation as anything else because we have to be able to some degree self-regulate to show up for our partner and our when somebody's got to be the initiator of the co-regulating process. So
for
anyway,
sure.
the point is that it just my work is, hey, I'm going to help people come together emotionally so they understand this isn't just about what car we're going to get. This is also about, do my needs matter to you? Are we working as a team here? Or are you just making all the decisions? Or do you care about how I feel safer in a safer car. And I'm going to look at that emotional component and help them put words to that part. And that applies to any other area of their life where they might be experiencing conflict. And what I have found is that when couples can learn what they didn't learn in childhood, which is to show up for each other emotionally, all of a sudden they start working better as a team just to get through the logistics of life. And there are some times when you do all the emotional work and you get it really healthy, and they still turn around and go, we still are incompatible here. Like, we want really different things out of life. And it's not something that it seems like we're going to be able to navigate. And in that case, that's a mature decision to walk away, but at least you're not walking away being confused about what the real issue was.
How common is that?
Not very, in my
Not very?
opinion.
It's so
Mm-mm.
interesting
Yeah.
because for so many people, they get into these relationships in their early 20s, mid 20s, somewhere around there. And then several years in and a couple kids later, there's all this distance that's been created for
Mhm.
a variety of different reasons. One partner decided they were to go get their doctorate and now they've elevated
Yeah.
to a certain level within their career, and their other partner stagnated and stood still throughout that time period because they were busy supporting the other partner through that process. And now there's this level of incompatibility that's just not there.
Mhm.
We're not speaking the same language anymore if we ever were. And so much of this
Mhm.
really comes down to that emotional language of how we speak to each other, but not just through attachment or love languages, but the actual words that we're
Mhm.
using to convey our experiences to one another.
Yes, absolutely. I think that in that kind of a situation, that couple has a lot to work through, right? Maybe there's some resentment from the partner who stagnated. And all of that stuff is workable,
Yeah.
right? And by going through the process of working through it, both partners find deeper parts of self. Both partners find more ways to access and communicate about their real authentic selves, and a lot of times that creates a bond, and instead of it going from, hey, this journey actually destroyed us and now we have no common ground, now we actually have used this as a way to know each other even better. We've used this experience, now we've gone through it, we're reframing it in a way, and learning to talk about it in a way that it actually becomes, hey, look what we went through here, look what we learned about ourselves, and look, how can we go forward balancing each other, instead of like you going into your people pleasing, shove yourself aside mode, and me going into laser focus, I got to get accepted by the world, so I have to go down this path. And so that can actually, an experience like that, if really processed in the right way, can actually help the couple stay together. But there's no guarantee, because sometimes you're
Right.
right, sometimes that partner who went on learned and wants to go take on the world and live life on a different level, and the other one's, no, I'm cool, I don't want to travel around, I don't want to, I want a simpler life, that's who I am. So it really, it doesn't, that scenario, it just doesn't have to be a death sentence, but it might be. It's just, if you don't do that work to really get to the heart of the problem, then you can never know. And there's all sorts of ways to make sense of problems. If you aren't really able to get to the heart of it, people can make sense of all it in all sorts of ways that may or may not be actually accurate.
I love that part of your work, just the fact that you look at relationships in a very different way from a lot of people. It's that a lot of this stuff is solvable. Some of it is just learning skills and things that you didn't have
Mhm.
before. Some of it is just zooming out and being able to gain that new perspective, not only on your partner, but on yourself and
Right.
getting
Yeah.
to know who you are as a person. I love that you focus on attachment styles as well. So, for the people who are new to this, and I don't think very
Mhm.
many are who are listening, but what are the 4 main attachment styles?
Okay, so we're going to start with secure to define what we're all hoping for here, which is someone who, when they experience relationship distress, which we all do from time to time, we're designed to feel insecure if our relationship, something about it feels threatened, if we don't feel like our partner is there for us, or we don't feel appreciated, or we don't feel like they're validating us or supporting us emotionally. Our bodies are meant to go, oh, something isn't right about this. Something isn't right. I'm feeling a little insecure, right? So those with secure attachment, first of all, they're going to be less sensitive to ruptures, because they're going or perceived ruptures, because they have a general kind of sense of trust. And that's because they've either worked on developing security in that relationship, or they grew up in a secure environment and found someone else who has a secure attachment. So they haven't built up reasons in between them to have a baseline mistrust, or didn't bring that from childhood. And so they're not going to get as triggered as easily. Their triggers aren't going to be as intense because they're not walking around just generally either scared or having to protect themselves from feeling. And they're going to be able to manage that relationship distress in a way that communicates their needs to their partner from a place that's a balance of their heart and their head. They're not just wholly stuck in their emotions where they're just spewing, but they're also not coming from this very rational, kind of disconnected place where there's not a lot of emotional engagement. That might sound like you're invading my boundaries, or using healthy psychology relationship words, but in a way that as it isn't actually super warm and fuzzy and helpful. And then those so that's the definition of secure. It's the nature of their fears, not as intense, and the way that they manage the fears, healthy. And then you have those with anxious attachment, and they're going to get much more triggered more easily. They're scanning for threat because they have experienced in their life good reasons to scan for threat, right? You scan for threat so you can prevent bad things from happening, like being physically abandoned or emotionally abandoned. And so, one, they're more sensitive to anything going wrong. They're going to feel it more intensely. It's going to be scarier. Oh my God, what if it's always like this? What if it never changes? What if they're never going to be there for me? It's a lot of catastrophizing. And then the way that they manage those feelings is usually they communicate from this place of solve it right then and there, close the distance, get some sort of resolution right here and now, get some sort of reassurance, get some sort of relief right here and now. Even if it's a temporary band-aid, I don't want to have to sit here feeling so insecure. Their communication is going to come from this more intense place of emotional overwhelm, typically. And there's degrees of this. Some people are going to be yelling and screaming, and some people are just going to say critical things, but not super in a super escalated way. Again, there's a spectrum here. And then those with avoidant attachment, their MO is just don't have the relationship fears. Let's just push them away. Let's just pretend they're not there. They're very much there. Studies on attachment have shown that those with avoidant attachment who look the least distressed on the outside actually are more physiologically aroused on the inside than even their anxious counterparts who are over here getting big and crying, right? So there's something to be said for that. The feelings are there, but they have disconnected from them intellectually. And so that's what's kept them safe. Is why bother trying to do anything about it? Because it's not going to make any difference. Why talk about stuff? We're just going to get in a fight. Why talk about stuff? It's not really going to resolve anything. And I don't really want to face that part of me that feels like maybe I'm failing you. So I'm just going to go ahead and like stuff it away. And then when you bring things up, I'm going to really help you stuff it away too, by telling you that you're being unreasonable or telling you what you want to hear. And so obviously that's not a healthy strategy, because not only is this person not learning how to help themselves with their feelings, they're also not going to be able to help their partner with their feelings. And this is happening on both sides. Neither is better or worse. It's just two different ways of having a poor relationship with your own fears and communication skills. And then we have disorganized attachment. The way I like to describe that is you take a blender and you pour in some anxious attachment, and you pour in some avoidant attachment, and you sprinkle on a lot of childhood trauma or maybe adult trauma, and then you blend it up, and then you just like, you have the glass sitting there and you pour it. Maybe some goes in the glass, but maybe some like splashes out on the counter. So it's, yeah, there's all these elements there, but even the elements coming together can look very different from person to person. So it's a much more hard to label, hard to categorize, hard to predict what someone with a disorganized attachment might do. They might get scared or triggered in their relationship. They might not say anything. They might shove it down, or the next day they might start breaking things and drive away, or anything in between that. So there's a real lack of predictability. Those with anxious attachment and those with avoidant attachment and those with the secure attachment tend to be pretty predictable in the way they're going to respond to stress. Disorganized, you just don't know. And it can really, some of the responses from people with disorganized, understandably, because they have experienced a lot of trauma, can be a lot more escalated or exaggerated behaviors than what you're going to see with the other three types, which are actually, the other three types are actually considered organized, believe it or not, because they have some predictability to them.
The unpredictability with disorganized attachment, is that also then on a spectrum where somebody can potentially lean one way or the other at different time periods?
Yes, I follow the research, and that kind of is in line with what I experience clinically, what I see. And I do see that the people that I treat most often with a disorganized attachment tend to be more on the extreme end of the anxious spectrum, meaning that they can go back and forth, and sometimes they stuff their feelings away and sometimes they act out on them, but that core fear of abandonment, which is common to those with anxious attachment, is what's driving it all. You're never going to see, someone with the most common variation of a disorganized attachment, you're never going to see them consistently shoving their feelings away. Their default is going to be more of an escalated kind of panic response to things with some other stuff sprinkled in. You just don't know when they're going to be triggered. One day,
Right.
something might happen that doesn't trigger them at all. And the next day, the very same thing happens and they just go off because the unpredictability, I guess, isn't necessarily just related to how they respond. It's also related to if they're going to respond, because you have to understand there's like other layers here where someone with a disorganized attachment probably has a lot of problems in life, with work, with other relationships outside of their romantic, with their kids. And so their moods are not always very stable. It's not like bipolar where they have days of hypomania, then days of depression, and then it's more like one day can have rapid mood swings all throughout the day because there's just so much stress and chaos in their life. And so you really just don't know. Sometimes you can just say, look, these are the people out there that might be considered, in layman's terms, dramatic people, difficult people. And sadly, those are really shaming terms when really
Right.
what they're doing is they're struggling with trauma and a lot of just lack of help with their emotions chronically throughout their life. And of course, they don't know how to help themselves. And yeah, I would say about 10% of the population is statistically what we're going to see disorganized.
It interests
Mhm.
me because so I listened to your book. I do a lot better with
Mhm.
audibles, but when you said disorganized, impoverished, I was like, because
Oh,
then I heard all the things and I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
okay,
Um,
then maybe I need to speak to that. Do you want me
yeah,
to? Okay,
sure.
so I sometimes I don't know for the audience I'm speaking to how nuanced we want to get with this, but there is that other version of disorganized that kind of lines up better with the avoidant end of the spectrum. And these are the people that you're not going to see them getting escalated very often. They're more likely very flat, very have learned to keep their emotions way, way down because if they even let a little bit up, it's gonna too much, way too much. They don't know how to cope at all with all the kind of big stuff that happened to them through childhood. So they have to work overtime to keep it all really shoved down deep. And you're going to
And
see a lot of, let's not create too much stress in my life. Maybe I don't even want to be in a relationship because that if that's way too vulnerable, I might have this stuff get tapped into, but it's not conscious. This is all happening out of consciousness.
yeah, so can that be secondary disorganized attachment? So you have two caregivers, they experience their lives were traumatic or they had some difficulties throughout their lifetime. They come together, they have a family. Can that be then passed on to their offspring in that way? Just
Okay,
by
oh, absolutely, because how are those people parenting? If they're parenting in a way that is going to be a reflection of their own difficulty with their own emotions that they receive from their childhood, if they're not able ultimately to be supportive of the child's emotional world and comforting of that, and then instead, on top of that, not only just not showing up in a healthy way, but now punitive, abusive, very shaming, and you're giving that child a list of reasons to do all sorts of things to try to manage their emotional experience that isn't healthy. And yeah, that absolutely. Some kids might, for whatever reason, temperamentally or whatever, just learn, cut it off, move forward, don't go there. And they're good at that. And I don't know what makes someone good at that versus the person who tries to manage their feelings in other ways by getting the world to do or say what they want the world to do or say, or people to act in the way they want so that they get to feel okay. And sometimes lots of different things that it's the difference between internalizing your feelings to try to just deal with them on your own, or externalizing your feelings by trying to get other people to change or expel your energy, get that energy out of you. And yes, absolutely. This is all going to be transmitted through parenting practices.
It's
Attachment
so
is
interesting.
100% relational. It
Yeah.
is, nobody is born with an insecure attachment at all, period. The whole term attachment relates to relational only. You can be born with certain traits and certain temperament and all sorts of things that are going to impact the relationship between the parent and the child. But ultimately, it's the nature of the relationship that is going to determine the whether someone has an insecure or secure attachment. I have an example if you'd like for me to share.
Absolutely.
Okay, so my children, I have 6 children, and my 5 of them were really easy, mellow babies that just normal babies, I would say, not overly mellow, and then I had twins, and one of the twins, Sophie, was crying all the time, just all the time crying. She just needed her nervous system. I don't know if it was because she was a twin, but her nervous system just needed more soothing than the others. I needed to hold her all the time. I needed to sleep with her until she got to about 8 months old. But if she was, there were times when not only what did I need to be holding her, but I needed to be holding her while moving forward. So I couldn't
Right.
even walk in circles around the backyard because her little body knew we were going in a circle. Like it had to be straightforward. And so at the time I knew what I was doing parenting wise. Luckily with the first, I don't know what I would have done with that, but luckily I knew, hey, give her what she needs attachment wise, just hold her. She wants to be held, hold her. That's what her nervous system is needing. And she's a beautiful, very sensitive, artistic 16-year-old now with the heart of gold, just the sweetest little thing with a secure attachment. Had I reacted to that temperament with, oh my God, this baby's out of control. She needs to learn to deal with it. She needs to learn to sleep through the night. She needs to learn to self soothe, or it maybe even feeling angry feelings toward her that is very common for moms, especially those who didn't get their own emotional needs met growing up. Then there is a high likelihood that she would have ended up with either a very strong anxious attachment or a disorganized attachment. So it's her temperament could have taken us down this bad
Right.
road. And luckily, the twins were my fourth and fifth. So I already knew what I was doing a bit at that point. But
It's wonderful because it gives people hope that if you are doing the work, you are reading the books, you're going to therapy, you're putting in the effort, that it's not this guaranteed thing that your children are all going to be insecure attachment, that you have this opportunity to take in this knowledge, embody it, and then deploy that in real time tactically
yeah,
in your life to be able to use that. And is that still a guarantee? Not really, but you did
no,
everything
there's
that
no
you knew how to
guarantee.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's never a guarantee, but we can dramatically increase the odds. That's what I like to tell
absolutely.
people. And I also will just say this, my oldest two, I really didn't know what I was doing when they were born. I really didn't. I had this idea that, look, I just need to undo my whole Gen X latchkey kid
Right.
upbringing, and I just need to get all the right elements in, the right food, the right clothes, the right school. And I had no clue how to support children emotionally. None. Not I didn't know how to support myself emotionally. And it did create insecure attachment in the two of them. And I have absolutely been able to, as I learned this information, when those two were like, let's say 10 and 12 is when I went back to grad school, I've absolutely been able to reverse all of that just by shifting my relationship with them. So everything, I can't say everything is workable, everything is reversible, but I really have very good reason to believe, both professionally and personally, that we can, if you can't even completely reverse it, you can absolutely make things exponentially better and learn from what went wrong at the same time. I don't know that we're all meant to have these perfect secure attachments and come into the world like that. A lot of this is just so much healing is in the work and learning resilience and
There's that word. I was waiting for that to get
yep.
mentioned because it's such a huge part of this.
It really is.
Are you able to build and cultivate the tools of resilience, and what does that look like for
Yep.
you individually? Because everybody's going to be different, and what works for me isn't going to work for you, but maybe it will. You don't know until
Maybe it
you
will one
try.
day. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. We're all
it's
evolving.
absolutely. Another thing that we hear a lot about, and everybody talks about this differently when they write their books, but you'll hear things on attachment theory where they'll use, APDA, AA, and all these additional
Mhm.
labels to talk about attachment. The problem that I see with this, especially in my comment section, is people will then take these my DA or I'm
Yeah.
AA, and then they wear it, they tattoo it on their heart, and
Yeah.
then that's who they are forever. What can we say to those people that take these labels and try to wear
Mhm.
them permanently? What's some advice that you would give to somebody who's going through that?
Yeah, I'm glad that you're asking this. People sometimes, like I said, with social media can like enable is can easily enable our least healthy parts. Sometimes labels can enable the defensive nature of of using the label as a way to, I don't know, make sense of things in a way that kind of gets in the way of sitting with the discomfort of not being able to make sense of everything perfectly. A lot of people will actually look at these attachment styles and go, wow, that fits. Clearly, I have an anxious attachment. Clearly, I have an avoidant attachment. Or, you know what? Disorganized feels pretty relatable to me, or secure. But there are always going to be that, let's say 25% of people who are just complicated. They had all kinds of different people raising them growing up and different kinds of dynamics later in young adulthood or adult relationships, and they're not going to really be able to fit into a box perfectly. And then what happens is if they're one of their ways of defending against their own feelings is to obsessively try to find the right label, then what's that doing? That's taking energy from healing. Trying to find the exact perfect right label or the exact perfect right label for others. First of all, some people just think that they have to heal, right? And you don't. You really don't. And then some people just get caught up in that as a way to intellectualize their problems. And it's that their heart is in, if I can just get it right, if I can just get it down to the
Right.
finest detail, then I'll finally know what to do to heal. And that's the point at which the labels start to not be a helpful thing and start to actually be a harmful thing. When you're using them in a way that is just making you more confused and more obsessive. And so the answer there is sometimes we just have to step back and say, you know what? Who cares if I'm avoidant or I'm anxious or if I'm disorganized? I have an insecure attachment somehow,
Yes.
right? I'm
But then
not
people will
feeling
say
that great.
that's too
Yeah.
reductive, and it's not. It's
It's all the same thing once you're out. If you really, these ways of categorizing insecure attachment, it's still all insecure attachment. And so I think people really, what I advise in the book is look at what your behaviors are in the relationship that you don't like and your feelings that you don't like, right? If you're telling me, look, I get into a fight with my partner and I have this tendency to shove my feelings away and then start yelling, right? That's one of my problems. I don't like that. Okay, now what are we going to do about that? First of all, what feelings are going on for you in your body right before you yell? Let's talk about that. Is it some fear? Is it some loneliness? There's lots of stuff there. Second of all, why do you need to yell to protect yourself from those yucky feelings? What is it about yelling that feels like it's going to help you? Then I'll be heard. Okay, so you're yelling to be heard. That makes a lot of sense to me. Can you tell your partner that? When you see me yelling, you see this angry person, and I get that, like, that pushes you away and I want to work on that. But where that's coming from in my heart is that's my way of hoping I can get things to change here. And then we start talking about the deeper layers of that. The reason I want things to change is because feeling alone and sad and rejected is the worst place for me. I felt that way my whole life growing up. I felt rejected and alone and sad with my big feelings. And so I've learned to just do everything I can to not have to go there. This is the work. I never said one time what your attachment style was.
yeah. And then we just keep recreating it in our lives until we finally get to the place where we're ready to start navigating it and
Yes.
processing it. It's so wild. We're so complicated as people, as human
You
beings.
know, I'm putting out a podcast. I've started recording. It's going to come out maybe in a month or so. I need to bank some episodes, but I'm working with an actual real couple. I'm doing 20 sessions with them. The podcast is the sessions, and then I'm adding in commentary to say, here's what I'm doing, and here's how you can use this at home. And I have to tell you, everybody's going to see how we're all really the same. Like, it's
Mhm.
complicated, but it's not at the same
Right.
time. I don't know how you put that concept into words, but it's
Well, it's
deceptively simple.
yeah, it's so much it's so dependent on knowing what you like and what you don't like, and then being
Mhm.
able to, again, be that third party to the experience and become the observer and begin to really understand what's happening and all the little moments that kind of lead up to these different places. And then, like you said, you go somatically into the body to be able to
Yes.
figure out, what am I experiencing and can I name this feeling and how old am
Mhm.
I in this experience right now? Because it's not the 45-year-old version of me that's coming out and yelling and
Sure.
screaming, right? It's the 5-year-old or the 10-year-old or whatever it is. But if you can name that feeling and begin to dive into that a little bit more, you learn more about yourself. And it's like that self is so important. And you ask the question, who am I? And then you start asking other things. Where am I going? What am I doing? Why am I
Mhm.
doing it? And all of a sudden you're painting this picture of who you are authentically, of who you really
Right.
are, and not this version of you that's been conditioned to be the 30, 40, 50-year old that you are
So
today.
true. Yes, yes,
So
yes.
are you going to call it co-regulated?
Was that yours?
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh, that was brilliant. Okay, I just said that to my producer, Jeremy. I was like, I love co-regulated. That's my favorite, but I'm going to call it the Secure Love Podcast.
Ah.
Yeah. Co-regulated is definitely my favorite, but you know what? I want to tie it into the book as much as
Yeah, no,
possible,
that
but
makes much more
yeah,
sense, but the marketing for
yeah.
that would be so easy, right?
Yeah, yeah, it just
Uh,
makes sense. But no, I loved co-regulated, and then there was another one that I thought was so cute, attach and release. Like, I attach them and then release them to
uh-huh.
the world.
No, I love that. That's
Yeah,
so
there
funny.
were a few really cute ones, but no, co-regulated, hands down, was my favorite.
Define vulnerability for us.
Vulnerability, stepping out of your comfort zone for the greater good of yourself or your partner or your life, which is all the same thing. Stepping out of your comfort zone, anything that is going to help you create deeper connection or even just have a better life that you're afraid of and you're not doing because you're afraid, right? So in the context of a relationship, for one partner, they are really afraid of their own anger. They don't want to talk about anger. They don't want to show anger. They don't want to feel anger. Anger is a normal part of all relationships. It's a healthy feeling. It's can be not healthy what we do with it if we're screaming and yelling or throwing things or hurting people. But so some people just choose to, they have a very bad relationship with their anger for good reasons. Their vulnerability might be to say, listen, I do get angry. I do get angry when we're chronically late and you're never ready on time because I get embarrassed or I get that impacts me. It impacts my life. When we're late places, it's important to me to be on time and it does make me angry. And what I do is I want to shove that anger down because I don't want to push you away, but I realize that I do need to be able to put space to those words. And so what might be vulnerable for someone else is they're fine talking about anger. They talk about anger all the time. They're like, this makes me so mad at you. It makes me really mad when you're late. For them, the vulnerable thing might be to say, you know what? When these things happen, and I've told you over and over, it's so important to me to be on time, and we're still being late everywhere, and you're still not ready. I feel like maybe, what is it about me? Do you not care about me? Does my voice not matter? Do I even matter here? I grew up in a home where I got messages all the time where my feelings didn't matter. And so it's really easy for me to go to that place. And then I feel powerless and demoralized. And that's when I want to get big and start protesting. So do you see how, like, both of
Yeah.
those are vulnerable? Both of those, there's good reasons that person might want to not go to that place. One would rather hold on to anger. That's what feels safe. The other one would rather not talk about anger. That's what feels safe. Both of them need to be able to try something new for the greater good and learn how to get comfortable, learn how to
Yeah.
go from discomfort to relative comfort. We're never going to be fully comfortable, but we only grow when we're uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
another thing to point out about vulnerability, it is not dumping 20 years of stuff on your partner all in one sitting just because they asked you to be
No.
vulnerable. That's not what it is.
No, that is something that is probably the opposite of vulnerable because that person, their vulnerability is being more measured, taking things slow one at a time. That's what's scary for them. There's
Yeah,
something that feels very safe about dumping it all, which is if you're staying in a safe place, you're probably not being vulnerable. Yeah,
Julie,
yeah.
Julie, thank you so much for spending time with the Blueprint audience today. Tell everybody how they can reach you and get a hold of your book.
Yeah, so secure love, it's a roadmap. It's the exact process I use with couples in my practice. It's goes from learning how to stabilize negative communication cycles using attachment theory all the way through to emotional bonding and then just working through life's problems together. And the podcast will parallel the book with a real couple. That is Secure Love by Julie Menanno, available everywhere books are sold, in store, online, Amazon. And then the secure relationship is my Instagram account where I have lots and lots of free information. I try to put all the information I know on Instagram. It's
So
not,
good.
oh, thank you. Yeah. I don't like to keep things locked up behind paywalls. So I try to provide it all for free. But in the book, it is much more organized and linear. But if you don't want to buy the book, definitely go to the account. Good stuff there. I've got therapists who work for me that I train that do this work with couples. I work with couples.
Favorite part of my book, and I don't want to spoil it for everybody. So if you want me to
Mhm.
delete this out, I will. But you ended it with "Go be imperfect."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just hit me so hard because you spend 6 hours listening to this book, and I spent
Yeah.
all this time with you and hearing it and going through all the information and gaining all this knowledge, and at the very end, it just comes down to go be imperfect. Give yourself grace. You don't have to get it right, and are
Yeah.
you gonna get it right ever? Maybe not, but that's part of the fun of just being who we are. So just go live life.
I'll say one thing on that note, if you don't mind, because I think
Yeah.
this is relevant. Yeah. So I told you about my mentor, George. So he's helping me with the podcast. So I show him the tapes of the couple and he gives me some feedback here and there. So we talked about the first session yesterday. And he was like, this is beautiful work. He was like, but you missed this whole piece. Like you missed this kind of like thing that needed to happen before this work. And I was like, okay, so here's what we're going to do with this. I'm going to lead in to the next podcast. And I'm going to say, I sat down with George. We talked about this. And George, you talked about how I missed this piece. So tell me more about that. And then he's going to say, here's what was missing, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm going to say, thank you. Okay, now today we're going to work on that because I really want people to see like this is an
Yeah.
actual process. I'm not necessarily just this perfect therapist expert here. Like I'm learning too. This is
So
how we
good.
have to really approach this stuff, which I'm not perfect. I did beautiful work with this couple, no question about it. But hey, there's some fine tuning to do there, and there always is.
When are episodes gonna
Yeah.
be released?
I think within the month, I'm going to try to bank 4. So I did
Okay.
1, 3 more. I'm trying to get my assistant to let me only bank 3, but she's no, we need to bank 4 just to be on the safe side. But I
Yeah.
would say 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 3 to 5 weeks. So I'm
That's
so
awesome.
excited. Yeah, this
You
feels
should
like the
be.
most important thing I've ever done, truly.
Attachment is the way. I
It
love that more
is,
and more
yeah.
people are talking about it.
I am
Julie,
just beyond excited. So,
you should be. You've worked very hard.
yeah.
You've had a lot of wonderful accomplishments with everything that you've been doing, and it's just amazing to watch people like you do what you do and do it so well. So thank you
Well,
for
thank
being here.
you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Okay. Thanks, Jay. Bye-bye.